Ever-growing box collection? Check. Packaging not where it's meant to be in the shed? Check. A layer of filth all over the floor? Check. That must mean we're into a new year. Happy New 2020 and welcome back after a little bit of a break. And there's also, the other thing I've been working on, more chronograph kits. That's right, because I nearly sold out of them and suddenly realised just after Christmas. So I've been very busy making more of them. But I can't get them in the box, even though I've finished making all the different bits of the kits. Oh, look. Shiny things. These are the used nitrous oxide cylinders. In fact, once they're finished, they look like that. Beautiful. And I'm very pleased to say I found a load more. I went out on an adventure with my son to one of those disused motorway bridges that you drive under, loads of them when you're going on holiday and things. And I always wonder, where'd they go to? Who uses them? Who are those strange people on them? Well, that day it was me and my son who went to one of these bridges and thankfully found lots of them. It's in the middle of nowhere, so the youths of today like to go and inhale their nitrous oxide there. And the reason it's in tinfoil, if any of you haven't watched any previous videos, is that the x-rays that the postage service use picks up this, and then they open the box and they find the cylinder, even though it's drilled out and has a label by it saying this is not prohibited because it cannot possibly hold gas. They then pack it all up and send it back to me. But since I've started wrapping it in 4 layers of tinfoil to stop the x-rays, hopefully, touch wood, I'm not even going to tempt fate actually. So that's that. So all I'm waiting for now, having had all 130 parts and things successfully delivered and made by me, is the wretched plastic rod company. Well, I'm still waiting for the acrylic tube and the acrylic rod to make the mercury compensated pendulum from. Here's one I prepared earlier. It's not actually here. I'll have to show you the original one. So, whilst waiting for that, and I'm assured that they're going to send them off soon, I thought I'd start a new little series of videos, something I've been thinking about for a long time. That is a how-to series of videos. I often get asked by people, here's the original lovely Nemnet Thrubwell. The original one I've still got in my kitchen, hence the filth. I do apologise if it comes out on the screen. How to do this. I thought I'd make a series of videos just focusing on particular little bits, elements of my steampunk inventions and creations and things. And lots of people have asked me about this on and off switch, which does obviously function properly. So I thought today, dear friends, I would explain how you can make your very own one. And also, while I was thinking about this, planning it whilst walking the dog in the park, I was thinking, well actually, if people want it, I could possibly offer just this switch and brass bits on my Etsy shop. I don't know, website. I'll have a think, and if you want to leave a comment, preferably polite, if you would be interested in something like this, do let me know. I'm going to make one today anyway, so I could put one on the website. Anywho, let's get on with it. As you can see, it's proper brass, and it switches on and off. Right. Here are the salient parts. These are the really nice parts. These are, well, the switch is nice as well. These are plumbing, standard plumbing fittings, at least in the UK. I'm not sure what it's like in the US. In the UK it's a lovely setup because there's a mixture of all sorts of different types of measurements, imperial, metric, all sorts of stuff. But, to cut a long story short, this is a radiator bleed valve key. You can get them in all sorts of different things. I think this is the winged version and it seems to be pretty standard. So to demonstrate, radiator bleed valve key, here's a lovely old radiator I rescued from somewhere, and in one end, and this goes for all modern radiators as well, there's a little square-ended bleed valve. You put that in there and you twist it and it lets any gas out, because if you haven't got lovely additive, Fernox, no, something else I can't remember, lovely additive in your water that goes round and round in your heating system, corrosion slowly produces gas, and it collects obviously from the top, slowly working its way down and stopping the radiator from being efficient. And if you let the gas out by undoing that, the water can rise back to the top and increase efficiency. Hey, thank you. They vary in price enormously. You can find them on eBay and Amazon and other places for sort of, I don't know, £6 or £7 each. I think the most expensive was £13. Or if you look around and go to proper plumbers merchants, you can find them probably for about as little as £1, something like that, perhaps even less. But they're solid brass, which is lovely. You could use some sort of other knob, but if it's plastic and you spray it with brass paint, just because you're constantly going to be moving it with your fingers, it's very likely the brass paint will rub off. So this makes the perfect solution. Then there's this bit which I use to support the switch. And this is an 8mm to 15mm compression fitting adapter, if you like. And what it does, inside it's got olives, not your olives that's used with alcoholic beverages or indeed salads and things, but these little copper ones, which means you put an 8mm piece of pipe in there, you tighten this down and it crushes the olive against it and forms a perfectly tight seal. Same with that end for a 15mm pipe. Now we don't need the olives, so we're going to get rid of them. We're not going to throw them away, we're going to save them for a rainy day, which has not yet arrived. I've got a box full of these things, I can't bear it. Right, so we end up with this. First thing to do is to drill this out to 9.5mm. Obviously it's 8 at the moment to allow an 8mm pipe in, but this is about 9, something like that. So we'll drill that out on the lathe so that the key will then fit into it, like so. I'm going to drill it out with a lathe, so I've clamped it into the chuck. I've got the 9.5mm drill bit here, high speed steel. If you haven't got a lathe, you could clamp it firmly and drill this on a pillar drill, or even, I suppose, with a hand drill, because you can use the 8mm holes as a guide. Right, safety goggles on, in case anything untoward flies off. And voila! So there it is, drilled out, and the key now fits in. You can see there's a nice lot of leeway as well, so cutting the spindle of the switch to length, it's not too, you know, the tolerances are quite large. Talking of switches, let's talk about switches. These are rotary switches and they're ever so useful. They have a little locating lug there, so if you mount them in a panel you can have an offset hole to stop everything twisting round. And generally these ones commonly come with 12 different positions. Now this is a one pole. I'm going to go and check that actually. I've checked and I was right, but it's one of those things as you get older and you think you know something and you think, hang on, do I know that, or have I just invented it? Poles and ways. This is a one pole, single pole, which means there's in effect one wiper in there, 12 way. So that wiper can move round these 12 different switches, one pole, 12 way. Equally with this, as you can see, there are some other pins here that have been cut off because this is the one pole version. You can get a two pole version. That's the wonder about 12, the number 12s. If you have a two pole version, it's 6 way, because then one wiper goes over those 6 contacts and the other wiper goes over those. And you've guessed it, you can have a 3 pole 4 way, and you've guessed it again, you can have a 4 pole 3 way. So very versatile switches. Now the other great thing about these switches is if you don't want 12 way or however many ways there are, they come with a limit stop. Well, let's unscrew that. They've also usually come with a gripping washer. The limit stop looks like this. It's got a little thing hanging down and there are 11 holes. Not 12, because one wonders why anyone would want one of these that couldn't move at all. The way you use it is you turn it right round anti-clockwise, or counterclockwise for the US. So I want one position, which I, well, 2 positions in effect that I did for the NempNet Throtwell. You put it in that hole and then it can click twice. I don't think I need to go into any more detail. You can leave that off and it'll click 12 times. So I want it on 6. You can put it into that hole. There we are. You get the idea. So they're really, really versatile switches. Lovely things. Thing is, we need to fit a round prong with one flat on the side into a square hole. Now this is where beautiful jigs come in. And I spent ages thinking about this, and I think I was walking the dog at the time actually, and it suddenly came to me. Ta-da! Here it is. I suddenly realised if I drilled and made a jig like this that would sit on the bandsaw, I could poke the switch through here, and that little prong that we talked about, the locating one, could fit into one of 4 holes. Now if you make sure that it's set at 0 to start with, you can then run that against the bandsaw blade, turn it through 90 degrees and there, and if you set it right, you end up with a square end. Let's go and do that now. Luckily, and not surprisingly, there's a little notch there where I've used this before, so I'm going to set this up against the guide about there and lock it as a starting point. This is a good thing about batch production, because you do it, set it up once, and then you can cut 20, 40, whatever you want after that. But I'm going to start with it a little bit over with a bit of space. Perfect. So that now fits onto there, and I've glued it on before, usually with super glue, but you could use epoxy resin or something just to fix that on there. Now I need to cut this down to the right length, and luckily the jig also caters for this, because I turn it round, little note there. So let's get that set up. Right, well, and cut that off. Now the next thing is to work out how to mount this into there, and for that we need to go to the laser cutter and cut out 2 2mm thick washer shapes in effect. Here are the 2 switch washers on 2D Design. There's the one that fits inside the brass fitting, and there's the one that clamps the switch into the brass fitting. Dimensions in millimeters. Now for the arduous task of changing this. I say arduous, nothing really was compatible, so what I have to do with all the drawings on 2D Design is to export them as a DXF file, which is a pretty standard format. Let's go to desktop, because I've got temporary, there we are. Save that there, yes, okay. Then I can close this, and I can open the laser cut software that came with the laser cutter, which, as I've said before, really does seem like some sort of, I mean, it works, don't get me wrong, but gives the impression that it was sort of a homework project for someone at college, computing college or something, as it doesn't do some really obvious things that it should do. Hang on, forgotten where I am. Desktop, temporary, open. Look at that, all that faffing about just to get these done. Now they're in there, I can use my, as you know, I must sort this out one day, my loving, this is invaluable, I should really look after it a bit better. Well, I do, it's the family taking stuff out of the freezer and resting it and all the food juice on it. Lovely. 15mm a second at 40%. That's 2mm acrylic. So what we do is we go up here and we go to, what did I say? 1540, that's it. 15, 40, 20 for corner power, which is usually half of the main cutting power. Right, that's that. And the stupid thing is, it doesn't remember it. When I was in education, and we had laser cutters, this software that ran the laser cutter, you could have a whole library of different materials. Not on this. And even when you close this drawing, it forgets everything, so you can't even load a new version of it. But it is a small price to pay, don't get me wrong. Let's switch the laser cutter on. It's a very small price to pay. The fact I can sit and design things here and immediately cut them out is just beyond belief. It really is such an exciting thing to do. A useful tool this has, though, is Unite Lines. and it joins up any loose lines and also works out theoretically which ones to cut first. So it should cut these two middle ones, then the outside. Let's go to download, delete all the drawings on the laser cutter and download this. I delete everything else because my brain can't cope with it. Okay, so I open the laser cutter. Apologies for the noise of everything. Actually, no. Right, here's some 2mm acrylic. Waste not, want not, so always use as much of it as I possibly can. I'm going to sit that on there, and then what you do is you need to focus the laser with something like this. So you put that on there, and then with this particular laser cutter, you press Z, and the whole of the bed of the machine goes up and down, which is very useful, because it means that you could, if you wanted to engrave a huge chunk of wood or some material, there we are, that's it, it's just right now, so I'll press Z again, and then we can set this to where we want it to start, or move that, which is quite a lot quicker. Right, then we can say, oh, can you actually see any of what I'm talking about? No. Oh, excuse me, it's the doorbell. That's exciting. That was the plastic rod that I've been waiting for arriving. So there we are. What we can do now is just to go to test, which is useful, just to check. I wasn't looking then. Yeah, just to check that everything we want is going to be able to cut out and fit. Let me press start. Voila! Okay, and there we have our two washers. Isn't that amazing? I just cannot get over how incredible it is being able to create things, make things like that so quickly and accurately. Such high tolerances. Anyway, stop talking. Here's the plastic that's just arrived in a very, very well packaged tube. Right, so we've got all the bits. So now what we need to do, first of all, is to decide and set, remembering to turn it around anti-clockwise, counterclockwise first, how many clicks we want, basically, how many ways we want. We want 2 ways. And before we do that, this little prong gets in the way. On occasion I've cut all these off before realising or remembering that my jig needed them. What fun we had. I remembered this time, so I found, there we are, just snipped it off. Now we need to put on the smaller of the two plastic washers. Then we put this on. You can see that now holds that in the centre. Then we put this on. That holds that in there and clamps it all together. And then, this isn't going to work. This bit can be a bit fiddly, and because the camera is on, it is going to be absolutely... there we are. That wasn't too bad. So we'll tighten that up. Not overly tight, but now that means it's very useful because we want to clamp this down, so it means you can still turn this round once you've got it all fitted together. I'll show you what I mean in a minute, but that's that bit. Now you can see that this can be used to clamp this onto a piece of wood or something, and then that leaves the top free, and that now pushes on there, and now we've got our 2 clicks. If you wanted this key to be going further in, you could just cut a little bit more of that, this bit off. But next thing, I think we need something to mount this on, and we need a label. For example, begin and cease. Obviously, being steampunk, you can't say start and stop or on and off. It has to be Victorian style wording and phraseology, hence the advanced retard. We do like that, advanced retard. Let's go and do that. Here are the hole sizes for the other bit. There's the hole 21mm diameter that accepts the brass fitting through a piece of wood, plastic, whatever else, and the same 21mm diameter hole here, and this is going to be an engraved label. The actual text is going to be so small that I'm going to use raster engraving for that. I will explain in a moment, but let's first cut this bit, this hole, out of a scrap piece of wood that I've got. And one top tip that is pretty obvious, but I never thought of, is if you've got lots of fiddly little bits to cut out, and you want it out of stained wood, rather than cutting them all out first and then staining them, you've got it, stain the wood first, focus or something rather, very dark over here actually, stain the wood first and cut out all the bits afterwards. The nice thing about laser ply is that it cuts quite nice and darkly along the edges. Of a 3mm laser ply, it's 10mm a second at 40-20. As always, the exciting offcuts never thrown away. They're put into the bin of exciting offcuts, as you can see, which once it's full, I will happily send to someone if they pay me for the postage. It's nice to know that it goes to a good home. In fact, someone's already vouched for this lot, Bagsied it. Right, onto the engraved label. So we're going to cut it. That's the other useful thing about the software and things, is that you can have different colour lines representing different types of cuts, even though it can't remember any of them anyway. So black, I'm going to be cutting this piece of engraved, piece of laser engraving laminate out, and I've worked out through experimentation that the cut needs to be 20mm a second at 35% power at 15% for corners. This, however, the text, I'm going to change to engrave, and luckily it automatically sets that to some very complicated. It goes at 200mm a second, power 25, scan gap 0.05, so it basically draws this, engraves this, rather like old-fashioned tellies did, where it scans, a raster scan. Let's download that and get, oh hang on, I nearly forgot, let's unite lines. There we are, that puts it back up, just to be annoying. Download that and I'll show you what that does. Laser engraving laminate is basically, it comes in all sorts of different colours, but it's basically a thicker background substrate. That sounds like a good word to use. Substrate, try and focus it on the back when this is black substrate, with a very, very thin layer of another colour on the top, which obviously is white. So if you burn through this with the laser engraver, it will then leave you with the black showing. Let's do that. As always, I've focused it, and I'm just going to check that that fits. That's it. Waste not, want not. No, it starts, and it should start by doing the raster engraving. Because it's so precise, you can get very, very small, high quality engraving done with it. Although, as I've said before, if I was going to engrave bigger things, much bigger letters, I've found that having the outline of a letter and then drawing contoured lines inside about 0.1mm apart, you can go far faster and far more efficiently, because it only has to cover the area once. There we are, now the power's changed and it's going to cut it out. Lovely. Funny thing about laser engraving laminates is it just pong a bit. Well, you can see the detail. You can also see there's a bit of soot around it, so we'll use some isopropyl alcohol to clean it off. I was also very pleased to find, for the kicks and things, that white spirit will also get it off, because it just means if people haven't got, if they're building the kit and they haven't got any isopropyl alcohol, then white spirit will do, and that's a much more common thing to have. And wood alcohol or methylated spirits equally works well, although nail varnish, acetone, doesn't. It's the work of the devil, because it also dissolves the white plastic off the front, and if you clean too much soot off, you end up cleaning all your letters off. The other thing to mention about laser engraving laminate is, as with everything I suppose, it does come in all sorts of different qualities, and it is well worth finding a good source of it. I ordered some that was slightly cheaper from a company some time ago, thinking, oh, this is good, this is a lot cheaper, and it was produced so much soot and stink that you couldn't actually see with the lettering that was engraved. It was absolutely ridiculous, so I sent it back and made a fuss. Whereas this, as you can see, that's beautiful, that's such lovely sharp crisp lettering. Okay, let's see how we can assemble all this. What am I trying to, oh I know what I'm trying to do. Right, there's the front bit, there's the label, nice. Then we have that through the L, that's looking nice already. Then we can screw that up tightly like that. I won't do it for now, but basically a pair of pliers or wrenches or whatever on either side, you can tighten that really nice and tightly. Possibly get this positioned. I always try and get this positioned so that's centered because it just looks nice. You can tighten that up really tightly. Then you can sit the key on the top. Now it's time to try and position it. Obviously that's in the wrong position. So what you can do, because we didn't tighten this too tightly, you can just twist that round a little bit. Oh, look at that, perfect. Then what I do is I drip a little bit of super glue in there and a little bit of super glue in there. Probably not necessary. So a little bit of super glue here stops the switch from twisting and fixes it in place. It does make it much easier to actually put together. And then stop doing that. Drip some super glue in there, which I won't do because once you've done that you can't actually get the switch apart. You drip some super glue in there, or epoxy resin like Araldite or something, a little bit of that, and then you can push that on there. I would always recommend while the glue is drying just to sit it this way up, because it's never happened to me, but if you were a bit generous with super glue you could sit it that way up and the super glue could run down and glue the switch in the wrong place. Should be a disaster. So thanks very much if you're still watching. I still need to work out, because obviously if this does go on my Etsy shop and website, it would be very nice to offer people the opportunity to design their own labels, switch labels. I've got to work out how to do that, because it's quite an involved thing. If anyone's got any suggestions, polite ones, then do get in touch. If you've enjoyed this video and you've got a request for something else that you'd like to see how to achieve or make, do let me know in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, please click subscribe and the bell and other bits and pieces. Thanks again. Hope to see you next time.